Hi everyone, Dinosaur Studio here with another tutorial. Today we're going to take a look at how to create a convincing background for your webcomics, your illustrations, anything else you might want a hand-drawn background for. First things first, I'm going to open up Procreate. I already have it open. My canvas size is 1920 by 1080, but you can use any other standard size that you prefer. And we're going to paint a garden scene today. I went ahead to pexels.com. It's like Unsplash or anything else like that that has royalty-free photos, just in case you are unsure about, copyrights and stuff like that. So I went ahead and scrolled through, and I found a scene that I might want to replicate. So I clicked on it. You can use your finger to hold it down and hit Add to Photos. And I'm going to do it for one more image where I really like the color scheme. This scene seems to have a lot of vibrant colors. I will save this one as well by holding down and hitting Add to Photos. Going back into Procreate, I can go to the top left wrench icon and hit Canvas, and I can turn on the reference button, which you can import any image. I had already previously imported this photo, but I'm gonna just do it again just to kind of show you how it works. You can resize the image by using your finger on the bottom right hand corner of the mini screen that pops up, and this gray bar at the top, you can hold it and drag it anywhere you want. But for this image, we're actually going to use this garden scene as the basis for our reference. So that doesn't appear on any of our layers. That way we have a clean, fresh canvas, and we can go ahead and start sketching. I've selected a Procreate pencil, and you can use any kind of pencil you want, but I'm going to lightly sketch out the scene I want to paint. We want to have a lake over here to the right. Maybe it goes out of frame a little bit. We have some rocks. And then we have our trees. And then our background trees that fade off into the distance. Some foreground trees, and then some branches hanging down. Alright, that's pretty much a good basis right here, but let's make it a little bit more interesting. Maybe this is a very flower-filled pond area with lots of different things like flowers and plants that are growing in the foreground as well. So let's add a little bit of flowers in the foreground to give it some framing. Maybe a bunch of flowers here. And anything in the foreground might be closer, so it's going to be a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to do rough outlines of some flowers here. And anything, as a general rule of thumb, in the background is going to have less detail and is going to be less saturated. So our trees back here are going to be a lot less vibrant and a lot smaller. Alright, now that we have our sketch layer, I'm going to open up our layers, and I'm going to hit the N here on the layer 1, and I'm going to set the opacity down to something like 50%. And now I'm going to make another layer on top of it by hitting the plus button, going to my brushes, and going to my favorite Snatty brushes, and I'm going to select one of the drawing general brushes. So let's say I want to use the color palette from those flowers I saw earlier. What we can do is go to the colors panel, go to palettes, hit the plus button that's at the top right, and hit New from Photos, and you can import anything you want. I'm importing the flowers we have from that image, and as you can see at the very top, it creates a palette from that image. So now we have a bunch of different greens and pinks and purples and reds from the photo that we can work with. So I'm going to start with a base middle green, and I'm going to brush over all of this surface right here. Even a little bit over the lake. So anything on this canvas is fair game. You even have your reference photo, and you can use your finger to hold down on any part of the image and color pick from here as well. I'm going to color pick this light blue, and I'm going to lightly paint over where the lake should go. I'm going to start doing a little bit more contouring. This looks like a masterpiece already. You guys are doing great. Now we're going to also do the lighter sky blue, but I might make it a little bit more toned than the white, but a little bit less than the blue on the lake. I'm going to just give everything a little once over wash. Even right behind the trees. Alright, and now we have our base coat there. What I'm going to do next is make another layer on top, and that's going to be blocking out where the main elements of the trees and the flowers will go. So we're going to start with the, we'll start with the background. So we'll go ahead and look inside of this image and see that the colors in this particular image are a little bit more saturated than, let's say, like a normal photo would be. As I said earlier, the objects in the background will be a little bit less saturated, so we're gonna take a look at how to do that in a moment here. So I'm just going to add our, as Bob Ross says, happy little trees, and we're gonna add some foliage in the background as if the camera was pointing out towards the lake, and everything else on the sides curves up. Alright, so already it's looking better than our first image. Another fun thing to do is hit the selection tool, the third button on the top left, and actually I'm going to use this button. And then once you have this selected, use your 3 fingers to swipe down on the screen and hit duplicate. And now at the bottom menu we can hit flip vertical. And already we've created a shadow here. So what I'm going to do is go up to the layers, and I'm going to pinch the top 2 layers together with my fingers, and now we have one solid layer right here to work with. Alright, so since these are in the background, I'm going to use something called an adjustment layer in Photoshop, or just an adjustment in Procreate. So hit the second button on the top left, it looks like a magic wand, and we're going to go to Hue, Saturation, and Brightness, and you're going to select Layer. For saturation, you're going to bring it down a little bit until it looks a little bit more muted, and you can even adjust the brightness if you'd like. If the sunlight is harsher, maybe things in the background that are not getting as much sunlight would be darker, or if they're getting a little bit more light, you can have it brighter. I'm going to have it somewhere in the middle, around 45. If you want, you can even adjust the hue. I think this is a nice bluish green that I'm going to go with, and to deselect that, just hit the magic wand tool again. Okay, and now I'm going to take this foreground bright green from the reference image. I think that looks good. And I'm going to go back to layer 2. Actually, I'm going to make a new layer on top, and I'm going to paint this bright green on top. This is going to be a little bit more loose and fun, like that. And when you go to the discolor panel, you can see just how bright the hue is. It's on the right hand side, so it's very saturated and not super dark. So if we were to look at the harmonies or the classic, like, you can kind of see different variations of that, or the value. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to just go back to the disc. So if I have this color selected and I want to have something in that same range, another rule of thumb to remember is you can go down on the color palette, and then you're going to go down or left or right on the color wheel to give it a little bit more of a blue tint instead of going, you know, more saturated or less saturated. So this way it can give some variety to the tones. Just painting over like this. I'm going to go down and to the left again. Give it a little bit more shadowing. And my light source is going to be coming from the top right, so all the shadows are going to be on the left hand side of the image. So that's looking good. I also have some Ghibli brushes. I will link those in the description. So in my Ghibli brush set, I have some organic foliage texture, and you can take that brush and kind of experiment, but this gives things a little bit more of an organic, earthy feel. And I think I'm going to give a little bit more greenish yellow highlight on the right hand side here. There we go. You can use any kind of brush that you like for foliage. I just really like using a painterly kind of style to give it more of that anime manga feel for the riverbank. And I'm going to color pick from my own drawing and just keep mixing them together. You can change the saturation and the size of your brush, of course. And I'm going to color pick again. And then the smaller you get with your brush, the more detailed you can go. If your brush is big, you can do bigger strokes, which means things will be painted in a more general sense. Alright, that should be good enough for now. It looks like the riverbank is sloping quite significantly. If I wanted to do it exactly like in the drawing, the reference image, I would have the bend loop around like this. And then I would also make that part not touching the sunlight, have a little bit more of that shade we talked about earlier. And it might even loop across to the back of the lake here and give us a nice dividing line. Oops, that's a little error there. That's alright. Okay. Just keep adding some detail where the sunlight's gonna hit. And then you can do a little bit of reflection in the water there. Okay, so we have a good start here. Let's see, the next step would be to add our trees in the midground. So I'm going to select the brown that was from the color palette image there. I'm going to go into my Ghibli brushes and find, I guess, something that we can use to make the trees. I'm just going to do a lot of loose shapes right here. This isn't going to be exactly like in the image, which, of course is good. You want to do your own original stuff. But this is just to block out where things might go. I'm actually going to go back to my main drawing brush, go up to my color palette, and then go down and to the left. And I'm going to block out darker shadows on the left-hand side of all the trees. And then I'm going to go less saturated, and I'm going to fill out the middles of those trees. So trees have lots of branches, but you might have different kinds of trees with different lengths of branches in the middle and between. So it's important to just have fun with it. Okay, that looks about right. Yep. Okay, I'm gonna make another layer on top of that. And I'm going to select a darker green, actually maybe this olive green, and I'm gonna go back to my Ghibli brushes, and I'm gonna look for a foliage brush I like. I usually like to use the one called Bushy. Adjust the size, and then start doing my leaves. Doing it on a separate layer allows a lot more control for if you need to change or adjust anything later. Wow, of course, that's just an unintentional pun. And now I can go back and do some shadows in between them, which should be under and to the left again. then we'll do some highlights. There we go. Nothing super abstract, but general enough to be like, oh hey, here are the branches and the leaves of the trees. And then we can even add some flowers. I think there's a couple of flower bursts I like in here. I'm gonna go with this bright pink from this image. This is a little too small. There we go. We can start doing flowers in the trees. Must be springtime. We'll call that all set. All right. So of course you can go a little bit more detailed or a little less detailed depending on what your image is going to be like. But this is just to give you a general overview of where the foreground, midground, and background are going to be. So now we're going to do our foreground layer, adding a new layer, and we're going to go, let's just do this fun little plant maker. I'm going to use the color I've used earlier, and I'm going to start making some plants in the foreground. There we go, giving some size variations as well. And maybe even some variations of the flora and fauna by taking this color and going a little bit darker. Adding a few ferns, I guess these are what people call them, fern leaves. Oh, that might be a little too big. Maybe not. Yeah, I like that. There we go. Now we have a little bit of variation, and then if you want, you can go back to your favorite drawing, sketching, or inking brush. I like to use the studio pen, and then I can draw some stems. Adjusting the size there. The flowers. There we go. Might even add my own sort of leaf flourishes to them, kind of like how I did in Poem of Light. Okay. Perfect. And now let's use this nice vibrant purple for our main flowers. So I'm going to go back to the Ghibli brush set, and I'm going to select a different flower brush. Let's try something with some nice petals. Alright, painterly flowers should do the trick. Let's take a look at that size. Okay, that looks like it'll work. These are good for general enough flowers, so it's good enough for this tutorial. Okay, this is looking good. We have kind of our basic foreground, background, and middle ground finally set up. And you're free to do anything else you want as well. You know, I could add another midground element next to the trees, that being rocks, which means I'll go back to my snazzy brush, I'll go to my drawing, and I'll choose this nice brown, and I will draw out my rock. There's a lot of different ways to draw rocks and other organic / sturdy shapes like this. One of my favorite things to do is actually go to the selection tool, hit freehand, and then start drawing rough shapes, and then going to different colors, hitting your brush icon, and then you have a nice selected area to go ham in. And then if I use my multiply brush, I can do some other fun, you know, additions and cracks and stuff like that. There we go. And the varying pressure gives you different kinds of tones. So now I can do things like this. And I can even go darker tone, and I can color on top. Color on top again. Okay, we have a nice variation there. What I can also do is, since it's on its own layer, I can go ahead and click the layer and hit select. And then I can go to the multiply tool again, and I can do like a lighter color, increase my brush size, and give the whole thing a little once over to give it some more grainy texture. Okay. Now, to make all this look a little bit more grounded or put together, we're going to do another layer on top of the midground layer. And this is to kind of blend all the elements together. And we're going to hide everything using some grass. I know I have some grass somewhere. We could also use this moss brush. You know, I think I found the grass I like. Alright, I'll do long grass overlap. So this is going to be a layer that we make on top of the trees and on top of the rocks. It's, as you can see on the layer list, it's right above them. So now you can make grass that covers up the tree line, makes things a little bit more realistic, and same with the rock. It's right in front of it, so it looks like it's now grounded in the image. Of course, this means we're going to have to do a little bit of variety all over the drawing, so that's up to you. Use your discretion. And then, as you're going closer towards the bottom of the drawing, we're assuming that the camera is, you know, pointing off towards the horizon, so things in the foreground are going to be bigger, and then you can use your brush to go a little bit smaller for the distance and have the grass be a little bit smaller back there. Alright, you can also give some variation to that as well. And of course we're going to do our highlight grass. Okay. Looking pretty good. Okay, so we have one more step to do before we call this a generally complete drawing, and that's to go back to the background layer, which is the mountains. And since it's away from the camera, the focal distance will also change. So a good way to portray that would be to go to the adjustment layer and hit Gaussian Blur, and then using your finger or your Apple Pencil, swipe right slowly until you see the image go a little bit blurry. So this way you can tell that there's depth in the photo, that this is in the background, and it's not as important as what we're looking at in the foreground. Alternatively, you can do the same thing with the foreground, depending on where you want the focal distance to be. So I could also have the flowers in the foreground be the ones that you don't see as much. That way, the viewer's eyes are guided towards the trees. Maybe there's a little character on the left, you know, looking off towards the mountains and the rocks and the trees. This is another good tool to help give your backgrounds a little bit more of a realistic feeling and a little bit more depth. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.